and welcome back to another episode of the Zero Empty Spaces podcast, here with Boca Raton Innovation Campus resident artist Susan Mckenna List. If you didn't know about Zero Empty Spaces, myself, Evan Snow, and my business partner, Mr. Andrew Martineau, as arts advocates, community builders, and creative entrepreneurs, started an initiative to activate vacant commercial real estate spaces so talented artists like her could have space to create and collaborate affordably outside their homes. It's led to a myriad of win-win-win benefits for the community and all parties involved. And to find out more information, you can log on to zeroemptyspaces.com. But the point of the podcast is to connect you with talented artists like her, to find out more about their backstories and how they create these beautiful works of art. And Susan's had quite an illustrious career of art. So for those that do not know you, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started in the arts?
I'm from Bergen County, New Jersey, just outside of New York City. My father was a landscaper, my Norwegian grandmother a cross-country skier, I guess you'd say, decorator. So I think that linked me to landscape early on.
What city in Bergen County?
Fair Lawn.
That's right.
Yep. Didn't think I was going to college. Met somebody who said, "Oh, you're a little bit smart. You should go to college." So I worked 2 jobs after a year off just to save money to go away, and ended up proudly graduating magna with a degree in English. I had an opportunity to go to Rome, Italy, so lived there for a year.
Oh.
Came back, landed in Washington, D.C. Wanting a more classic education, I decided, and didn't know what I wanted to do. I decided, okay, I'll go for a master's in library science. So that led me to a management consulting career in D.C., to Department of Energy and the military, which was interesting, Department of Defense.
Interesting.
Yep. So I had about a 10-year career doing that. It was a lot of fun. They were looking for women at that time, and I ended up working in a way where I would have needed a master's or a doctorate probably to have that position today. In any case, had 2 kids and was home while my husband was saving a company in California. My artist neighbor had gone to Florida, so there I was with 2 kids by myself almost all the time, and tried to drag my kids away from the TV and said, "Oh, we should draw each other." We tried that and laughed at the drawings, but I thought, I could really enjoy this if I was patient with myself. Gave myself a chance to really learn how to see.
Well,
And I would surprise my neighbor when she came back from Florida. So that's how I started.
really?
Yep. I had been writing poetry. I'd been trying to write short stories. Because I was an English major, I had learned everything about what makes good writing, and I decided my writing was never good enough. So with the drawing, I didn't really know enough. I hadn't developed a critic.
Sure.
So it was more freeing than just dealing with words. And it was more of a process where you just do it, and it's out of your head, onto the paper or the canvas, onto the wall, and there it goes.
There it goes.
So I gave up writing and started learning to draw.
Where were you living at that time in California?
I was not in California. I was in Falls Church, Virginia, right outside of D.C.
Okay. And how did things evolve from, I guess, that early drawing experience with, obviously a little bit of the poetry in there, to you taking art more seriously, or pursuing it more seriously?
I started to take classes. I started to do a lot of reading and looking. I spent a lot of time in the backyard, trying to draw these little flowers and trying to get it to work, not knowing what the hell I was doing. And most of the classes I took, I ended up in the same place as with writing, because there was kind of a standard. I was not good enough
Sure.
to get there. then I got yanked out of the DC area and ended up in Northern California and took drawing, pastel portrait, studio painting, probably for about 4 years, and life drawing.
Okay.
Was doing those things, still kind of stomping around, and then somebody said, you should meet this group of painters that works outdoors. So they hooked me up with a woman named Pam Glover, and she was a descendant of the Society of Six, which is well known in the Bay Area. They were a group of painters that saw the show at the Palace of Fine Arts in 1916, decided that they would try and paint the Northern California landscape like the Impressionists or like the Fauvists.
Oh.
So she had painted with one of these fellows, and she had a very direct way of painting, very colorful, slightly abstract and funky. So I started to go out painting with that group.
Plein air painting.
Plein air painting. She had a group of consistently 25 painters. And this was before plein air painting became popular. And I really liked it because I could, after a few times of filling up your car, setting up, standing out there painting, leaving with nothing or leaving with a blank canvas, half-done canvas, you finally say, okay, I'm going to cover this sucker if it kills me. And it makes you work fast. I'm sorry.
She's very honest.
It makes you work fast.
Well,
and then you don't have time for the critic.
Could you tell them, for those that might not know, what
Sorry,
plein air
my
painting
voice
is? You're good.
Yeah.
For those not familiar with plein air painting.
Okay, plein air is simply French for outdoors, and it's on-location painting. It's a practice that artists have done forever, but it was never really respected as its own genre. Of course, Courbet and Monet
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Started that as more of a tradition, although Monet used to go to the same place every day and keep working on the same canvases. This kind of plein air painting is more just that one day, that one event.
Right.
And it's supposed to, hopefully, show more in terms of the energy in that particular day, usually more intuitive response, as opposed to a studio painting where you might really plan and do all kinds of studies and then take your time executing.
Sure.
And it was also a good way for people to begin their art collections, because generally the paintings were priced at a lower price
Correct.
point. That's all changed since it's become more popular.
Sure.
It's all become more refined. But
Well, and it's
Sorry.
you're fine.
Dusty.
It's probably one of my favorite styles of painting, especially in a beautiful place like Florida, or in a beautiful place like Northern California, where there are beautiful landscapes to paint. And some of the Monet paintings that come to mind, obviously, are really masterworks.
right.
Even though he was, still figuring out and evolving at that time. So from this experience of plein air painting and the friend's encouragement. And now I guess you're a couple years into it. You're getting some more practice. How did things transform to more of a professional? Or are you taking it that much more seriously?
Yes.
Because they have.
Right. Well, Pam was a wonderful mentor
That's great.
who pretty much just would always tell people, keep going, keep going. So we would have, male engineers who recently retired, and they would come to class and they'd say, I can't do anything, or they'd try to be very precise with what they're doing. And you could see that if they worked seriously for 2 to 5 years, they could really become competent painters, mostly by going out, just challenging yourself to see what's in front of you, and just learning how to see what's lighter, what's darker, what's this color, what's that color, this shape, that shape. And then part of the process is everybody would put their paintings against the curb or whatever, and we'd all be painting the same thing, but all the paintings would be different.
Right.
And critiques were very open, and I guess it was more open than a lot of circumstances in terms of finding your own style. When I started teaching later on, I had a young woman who came to our gardens. We painted my house up here with the gardens in front. And she would come with a little 4x4 canvas and make these little dots and little patterns. And she'd come to me afterwards and I'd say, well, that's nice, you know. She'd say, well, but I need to learn perspective. So I told Pam about her. I said, what do I do with this student? These things are really great, and she wants to learn perspective. Pam said, leave her alone. And that was it. But you ask about the more professional. And what happened there was that Pam, when she saw that you maybe had some streetable work, and I think there were 3 of us in that time who she thought should be getting out there. She'd say, okay, now you have to go out and experience Hate Day. What's Hate Day? You go to a gallery, you take, a few 8x10s, you engage the gallery owner, and you show him your work, and he says he hates it, and you go.
It's a great practice. That's really...
And she said, and eventually, I'm sorry, eventually somebody will say, I like this, and you may get gallery representation. So she really encouraged us to get out there, and I'm trying to think of what my big break was. Well, actually, in terms of the history of plein air painting in this country, and it's funny, I was reading it the other day that there was an event called Scene on the Strait in Benicia, and that was probably one of the first plein air festivals where we were all invited to bring work and paint on location. And I did that festival for 12 years. And I was reading the other day that Eric Rhodes, founder of Plein Air magazine, he decided to become a plein air painter after he came to see Scene on the Strait. And I wanted to say, Eric, I was one of those painters for 12 years. But that was one thing that launched me, and then I started to enter other shows. I got into the Carmel Art Festival, which is a nationwide juried show, 60 painters a year. I got in twice, so then I thought, oh, it was not a mistake that they took me the first time.
She's very honest, she's very modest.
And that was a great but harrowing experience, because some of the painters there were really excellent masters these days.
Not to date you, but
Right.
for context,
Right.
about what year was this?
Scene on, let me see. Carmel Art Festival, I did 2000 and 2001.
And how long would you say you had been painting at that point?
I started in the mid-'80s.
Okay.
I'm trying to think. It's about the same time I opened the studio. So I had probably a good 8 years into my
Of serious
endeavor, yeah,
practice.
before I started selling. I'm trying to think of when I sold my first painting. I don't remember.
Dabbling initially with the drawing, and then evolving.
Yeah, but the Kickstarter was going outdoors, being forced to paint fast, and good music.
With the plein air.
With the plein air.
Yeah.
In fact, well, you'll laugh at this too. In the Bay Area, there was a Glide Memorial Church where I had a friend who about once a month would say, I'm feeling kind of down. We need to go to San Francisco and go to Glide Church because it was the best free concert in town. Drums, and Cecil Williams, who had a big program, community program for recovered addicts, for prisoners, he's very well known. So we used to go every now and then, and they'd have the chorus and the drums and the piano, and they made an album, Come Home to the Spirit, which starts with Maya Angelou reciting a poem where she says, you ain't got no rhythm, you can't sing. And I would stand there and hear this, and you can't paint. and And then they
Didn't
would
say that.
Then they would start singing very upbeat songs. So and I got to be like Pavlov's dog to that music, the pacing of the album and the music. By the time they got to Roll Away the Rock from My Soul, I could throw in a sky in like 5 minutes, and people around me were there saying, "Oh God, she's dancing again," you know. But that really helped a lot. I could tell which painting I did listening to that music. So that was another.
I appreciate you sharing that because you know, people get inspiration from various different things. I generally ask on the podcast what your artistic inspiration is, and the music is a form of art, and a lot of people don't always consider music, as you're going to find out in the book, had a profound impact on my life.
Oh,
and
really?
actually
Okay.
getting into house music and following a group called Bedside that was very eclectic actually helped me discover my what I liked within art. So what other, I mean, so thankfully you had a mentor, thankfully you found a group, thankfully you were in a very artistic place and a beautiful landscape, but what other artistic inspirations would you credit? They don't necessarily have to be Picasso or Basquiat or whatever, but other things that were influential in the development of your artistic practice.
Well, I love Maurice Vlaminck,
Oh,
if you know who
that's
that
a new
is.
one. No, I don't.
I don't know if I'm saying his name correctly, but he's a Fauvist. I picked up one of his posters, I think, at Pier 1 when I was a Washington consultant, had it by my desk. He paints in very primary colors, just red, yellow, blue, very energetic work, all alla prima, which means at the first, put it down and leave it, don't mess with it. Not the indirect method of painting. So he's an inspiration. One thing I think that's been interesting for me too is changing environments. So being in California and not being used to all dead grass and one lone eucalyptus, standing there with these people painting, and I'm like, what do they see? There's a
Right.
tree and a bunch of dead grass. And I'm sorry.
No, that's great. That's great.
And it took me a while to understand how they were painting the light and what they saw. So, and when I came to Florida and we're looking at the ocean, everybody's saying to me, "Oh, great, you get to paint the ocean." I'm like, it's a vast abyss. What do I do with this? Virginia, I had a chance to go back and I was like, what am I going to do with a sea of green? Same thing with going to New York. I got there, I had this bright palette, and everything was gray and brown and purple, and I didn't know what to do with that. You know, so the adjusting in the different environments has been interesting.
And the other thing that's kind of interesting that you mentioned about the plein air painting within the group is, you know, you have so many people there, they're all looking at the same landscape, but they all paint it relatively differently, somewhat the same, obviously plein air style, but it's really interesting how we all, you know, you might look at this grass as dead, somebody might look at it as alive, somebody might look at it as the most beautiful thing, somebody might look at it as, it's just another thing. But that's one of the beautiful things with art, that you're able to apply your perspective and your style and your influences on this canvas. You also mentioned, which is very interesting, and we've talked about this, you know, at length every time I see you, the different places that you have been fortunate enough to live have played an impact in your life, in your work, how you sell, where you exhibit. You've shared with me and the group here that you've lived and exhibited and had studios in some very interesting places. Could you take us through some of those journeys that
Sure, yeah.
you've exhibited in?
Yeah. Well, in California, when I was when I was starting to be on the circuit, so I did the Carmel Art Festival, I did Sonoma, which was very arduous, also, you know, an important festival. I have to hand it to the people who are on the circuit now, because I decided I can't do that anymore. It's a big job. But getting the studio I've talked about in California was a great move.
Could you tell what you were sharing earlier?
Yeah, and that was that there are very few artists who are willing to make the financial investment and take the risk of opening a studio. But I had an opportunity come up, and I opened a place with another woman. Took the lease. She only lasted a year, and then I ended up having it on my own with 2 tenants. And I was the plein air kind of landscape painter type. Then I had a watercolorist and a pastelist with jewelry. And it was great because people would get their coffee and come and sit on the sofa and chat with us. We always had good music going, and I ended up doing a lot of commissions. I ended up actually being written up in one of the design magazines because I did a painting for someone who grew up in the Chancellor's home in Berkeley, Blake House. And then I had a husband where whenever there was a anniversary or a holiday, he would come and he'd say, "Okay, I need a painting." So I did like 6 or 8 paintings for them. Woman went on vacation to Ireland, came back with some photos and said, "Okay, will you paint these too?" So I think my experience as a consultant made me a little more adept at communicating and being flexible with what the client wants than a lot of artists might even want to bother with. So it worked for me, and I enjoyed it. It was great.
It has, and you've had, you know...
And I still get some commissions. I'd like to get more commissions here, but Florida, I had developed really a national reputation because I was in galleries in Carmel and Scottsdale and Morristown, New Jersey, and I've shown Morristown.
One of my favorite
Really?
cities.
I was in Grace Gallery there. Actually, I sold stuff there. Yeah, pretty. But I didn't realize when I came to Florida how regional the art markets are and how different they are. So.
And she's very modest and very humble, but you've had a relatively, successful career as an artist. You have been able to...
Right. I was paying the rent in the old studio, which was a surprise. Everybody
Which was
assumed,
not $5.
No, and yes, it did go up beyond what we were talking about earlier. It was good. It had mostly to do with having people get to know you and your work and feel comfortable. So you need the exposure, And I was thrilled when I found 0 empty spaces, because when my neighbor came home in Virginia and I said, "Look, Sally, I learned to draw," she said to me, "Susan, you're far too social to be an artist." And I was like, "What?" and in some ways she was right, and I think that's why when I found the plein air group, where we were a group and we would segment ourselves from talkers and non-talkers, and for me to be with a group of artists here, 0 empty spaces, it makes all the difference, because you get support from each other, you get another set of eyeballs, whether you agree with what the person says or not, it really helps.
It does. Thank you. I mean, I do want to take the camera, spin around, and show them a little bit, and I do want to ask, the question that we always ask about, what do you like the most about having a studio outside your home? And I think this space is super unique within itself, just because the amount of history in this building. We're in the Boca Raton Innovation Campus, the former IBM headquarters. Marcel Brewer, Brutalist architecture, all this great history. The PC was invented here, and then the fact that, God bless CP Group, formerly Crocker Partners, has brought in so much art to this building, aside from us. And then the fact that we've actually played a role early on when they were starting to do art on brick walls. We started curating a hallway, developed, thankfully, with a relationship I have with Gianna, the marketing director, to leading to us getting a space here, and now having community of 20 artists here that you can turn to and, say, what are your thoughts on this? Or even, I hear you guys kind of sharing about, supplies and mediums and where to buy stuff and what website that you should market your art on, what website you shouldn't market your art on. We were talking earlier about a term I haven't heard, honestly, in a while, about vanity galleries. Right. And things that, in all reality, I mean, you could spend time researching on the internet, but when you have the part that I love the most, one of the parts I love the most about Zero Empty Spaces, you guys generally all start off as neutral third-party strangers, then you become studio mates, and you inevitably become friends.
Oh, definitely.
And it's been really cool to watch like your relationship unfold and develop with Patricia and all of your studio mates here. We posted a photo recently of you drawing her.
Right, uh-huh.
It's really cool that, especially if you're coming from someplace else where maybe you don't know, you moved here, you didn't maybe know so many people, and you get to tap into that creative community very organically of your peers and your contemporaries. I love that, but any other thoughts?
I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking there are 3 other things I think I'd like to share.
Please.
And one is that so much for a lot of us, art making is such an intuitive, visceral, nonverbal activity that it's hard for people to understand. I think how you connect with somebody on a more visceral level.
Yeah.
Like when my mentor Pam passed away, I thought, well, I was sad about it, but I thought, why am I so devastated? And I thought about it some more, and I thought, well, we shared visceral, visual, physical, moving the things around, the experience of being in the same place. So you connect and share experiences on a lot more levels than you do with people who are not artists.
Correct.
Another thing that I've been surprised about is when I had the studio in California, people would come in and they'd say, I'm a musician. And then I'd say, okay, do you paint? Oh yeah, I paint too. Well, I'm a writer and I paint. Most creative people I've met have at least 2 creative outlets, but they don't identify or tell you that they have another one. I had a guy come in once, which was kind of a riot, and he said, I told you I was near Pixar land. Mm-hmm. So he came in, he said, well, I do paintings of mountains. Would you critique some paintings for me, please? I said, sure, bring them in. So a few days later, he brought them in. We looked at them, and I said, so you're a painter, what do you do? And he says, well, I'm a musician. I said, oh, what kind of music do you do? Well, I don't actually play something, I do the mix. And I said, oh, well, what does that mean? What did you mix? Well, like for films. Well, like for what film? Well, Forrest Gump and Apocalypse Now. And I was like, yes, really, oh wow. So I ended up learning that about people. It's something I didn't realize. And where I kind of put out my writing, every now and then I feel like writing again. People would say, you should write. And I go, no, no, no. But I do still write sometimes, or think that I should. And, it's... So it's interesting if you allow. I'm sure you're finding this with the yoga now too. That's another kind of sensory level that we all have, but we aren't necessarily in touch with.
Correct.
So fascinating layers of life and awareness that most people don't get the chance to tap.
Unless you are present.
Right.
And ideally mindful,
yeah.
And ideally open to, you didn't have to, now we're going to get mindful, you didn't have to take the opportunity that was available to you when your neighbor brought up drawing.
Right.
Right. You could have easily passed on that opportunity. You didn't have to take advantage of a very unique situation with the plein air group and having a mentor. You didn't
right.
have to go on this path, but if you are, in the moment, and open to new possibilities and, able to step outside your comfort zone, especially with
They could take a chance, a lot of risks, yeah.
the beautiful. So, and one of the things that we do have in common is now the writing. And with my first book, Learning to Choose, I'm encouraging people to consider the most beautiful things happen outside of your comfort zone. You could live in a bubble. You can live. You could have had a fine life. Going the path that you were going on, and you could have had a fine business career, and family would have been great. All things considered.
Right.
But think about how much more rewarding and fulfilling because you chose to pursue a path that has also not just brought joy and fulfillment to your life, but your work has brought so much joy and fulfillment. And this is the part I know you don't want to talk about, but how many collectors do you think you have? How many people do you think have bought your art in the last 30 years?
Oh, well, I will talk about that part. And that part is very fulfilling. And I don't know, maybe 100.
Hundreds.
Yeah.
You're very modest.
But when people call me up and they say, I have one woman who lives in Carmel now, and she calls me every now and then. She says, I see your painting every morning. Right when I wake up, I think of you every day. And it's too fun. And she loves it. And the people with the commissions, too. And that there you make another bond, which is interesting.
And especially, that's probably something we really don't talk too much about, especially within your work and your medium and your style. So they're commissioning you
Right. Yeah.
for something that they are choosing to pay to have in their home to look at forever.
I did live painting at a wedding also. That was fun. Yeah, that was good.
It's a beautiful thing. You truly are. You're not only also you've captured moments, you've captured feelings, you've captured experiences that now are cemented in time, on canvas, in space, that now somebody truly values and has a deep connection to, and they remember when you painted that, or when you delivered it to them, or when you handed it to them.
Yeah.
It's such a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
You don't have to cry.
The other thing too, have you read Winston Churchill's Painting as a Pastime?
Somebody brought it up, I have not yet.
It's wonderful, and he says in there, once you learn how to see, you'll never be bored. So when a little kid asks me, how do you paint, or how do I learn, I say, you have to start to learn how to see. So look over there, what's the darkest dark, what's the lightest light? Is that lighter, is that darker, is that bigger, is that smaller? And I feel sorry for people who don't learn how to see that way. Even if you never pick up a pen, it really enriches your life so much because you can sit anywhere and say, oh, look at the light on Patricia's hairdo over there. It's how light that is compared to the light of the wall or compared to Jen's pen.
Correct.
And you start to see things that way, it just makes your life so much more interesting.
I'm going to follow that up with another quote from a book. It's called The Yamas and the Niyamas. It's the ethical practices of yoga, not the physical asanas.
Right.
It's by Deborah. Many people have wrote, but Deborah Dell wrote a version that, thankfully, my friend and former Zero Empty Spaces artist Sarah LaPierre, aka Thick Paint, invited me to a book club.
Oh, she's wonderful.
She's the best.
She's beautiful, and she does these lively,
Everything.
terrific paintings.
And
disgusting.
TikTok videos. She's great.
She is great, yeah.
In this book and in this book club, Deborah Dell talks about seeing things with new eyes. And to that end, I remember, and it's in the book, Learning to Choose, I remember going to Wynwood for the first time and seeing the murals.
Oh, they're great. Yeah.
Unlike anything that I had ever seen before, especially back in 2014 when murals were still like kind of becoming more, common. And how seeing that art experience was one of the early catalysts for getting me into art. Now you can never see that again the same as you saw it the first time, but the thought of seeing things with new eyes and that new energy and excitement that it gives you is now something that kind of fuels me to explore new experiences, and that has had a profound impact on my life, discovering yoga, discovering meditation, discovering mindfulness, and it's almost now I have thankfully developed like a zest for learning and a zest for. I just had an amazing new seeing things with new eyes experience going to Seraphos, Greece, a small island near Milos, seeing the landscape and the countryside there, and 5-hour-long sunsets truly changed the way that I look at nature and the way that they live and the way that they treat the land and value the land and slow living. So I appreciate mentioning that. I do want to check out that Winston Churchill book, and I do want to let them check out some of your other work and some of your studio here. So I'm going to take the camera, we're going to spin it around, we're going to show them some of your process.
One thing.
Sure.
Favorite poem is Lines Composed a Few Miles Above Tintern Abbey. It's known as Tintern Abbey by William Wordsworth. You should read that one.
Okay.
Where I used to be a hiker and cross-country skier as well a long time ago. He describes in that poem the way he regards nature and how it changes over the course of his life, with being young, like a young buck bounding over the hills, who the hell knows, you know, and then how nature restored his soul while he was in the cities. And then at the end of the poem, he talks about, you realize he's with his sister, and talking about how now he sees nature in a more quiet, contemplative way. It's really a great poem. I hope maybe one day to illustrate the thing, you know, but you would enjoy that.
I think that would
we'll
be,
look at
well, I think that would be a beautiful thing, actually. We could also, on the little show notes here when we post this, we could share the poem, we could share the book recommendations. I'm glad to share Yamas and Yamas. Winston Churchill's
Tintern Abbey would do it.
Okay. And then we'll share.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Churchill's Painting as a Pastime.
Yeah.
And Wordsworth, Tintern
you have
Abbey.
some books
and
too.
And my book. Should I get that now, or what?
Well, sure. Let me spin the camera around. So tell us a little bit about what we're looking at in your studio here.
Well, this is the newest painting. It's from the beach on Boca. These people don't understand that I'm taking pictures of them while they're rollicking. And this is in acrylic, which I like to play with, but I'm still more an oil painter. This is my granddaughter. I like to use this as an example in trolling for commissions. Paint your grandchild, paint your family, paint your house. This is my house and garden in California, and I was quite the gardener. And then florals, weeds from the lake in New Jersey, New York, Palm Beach, up here, my painting setup.
Yeah, show us a little bit about your setup here.
Sometimes I'm on the easel, but lately I just like to prop things up and work that way. I put the foam core behind the canvas, so I don't splash everything too much. But this is easier, and of course with plein air painting you just learn to paint wherever you happen to be. However, sometimes I go to the beach and I just prop the canvas up on the chaise, use bungees to secure it, stick the brushes in the sand, you know, whatever works.
Very cool.
Yeah. These, I'm proud of these. My family hates these. I call the first three Me, Myself, and I. The first one is Makeup Won't Help Today. The second one is Face On, as in I put on my makeup. The third one is Black Glasses. And the last one, I don't know, is maybe a Hockney wannabe or something. That's an eyeball. So that's pretty much what's here.
So if they want to find you on social media and the interwebs, what are your accounts and what's your website?
My website is SusanMckennaList.com or SusanList.com. I have both. And on Instagram, I'm Susan McKenna List, and Facebook, Susan McKenna List Studio. And then the book.
Yeah, show us.
What should I tell you about the book?
The cover.
I was in New York, and I had the opportunity to do a solo show at a gallery in Hell's Kitchen. I have a friend, a drinking buddy, who's a big black guy, a Black Panther, And with me, we were quite the pair. We used to commiserate about how life would interrupt our creative endeavors. So I'd go to the Raccoon, the bar on 83rd in Amsterdam, and say, "Okay, Gary, I painted today. Did you write a poem?" And we would try to encourage each other that way. So when I got the solo show, I invited him. I said, "Okay, produce. Choose any of my paintings that you like and write a poem to my painting." And he ended up writing to it, and I put this book together hastily. I hope to redo it in a more fancy way. But he wrote to some of my paintings, and they're just really great poems.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, and we put that up with the show, and then I wrote a poem also, West Side Gothic, about him and how it's he and his wife. I did a painting for him, which is not the best painting, but it's still
a painting.
Still fun. So, and that was, I learned something about collaborating too. That was very worthwhile there. Really helped the two of us. Just keep it moving, keep it moving.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, I appreciate you sharing that. I appreciate you sharing your story with us. That was great.
Thank you, Evan.
We
appreciate what you do for us.
I encourage you guys to come by the Boca Raton Innovation Campus. Here's Susan's neighbor and friend, Patricia Lappin's studio, who you found on the podcast and on our social media before. Some other very talented artists. Donna Kelman over there. I'll just take the camera for a second and give everybody else some love. So, yeah, we're here at the Boca Raton Innovation Campus, former IBM headquarters, and always love having guests. So come see us. You never know what you're going to find. And, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
You're good. See ya.